Good evening. I'd like to open the meeting and welcome everyone to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 24th of April 2018. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I advise members of the gallery that open session of this meeting are being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will also be archived and made available on Council's website. Gallery attendees are advised that their presence may be recorded. Councillors, apologies. Councillors, I don't believe we have any apologies, but we do have leave of absence. So, councillors, we have received 2 requests to grant leave of absence. Councillor Cam Nation has applied for leave of absence from Monday the 23rd of April till Sunday the 29th of April inclusive. Councillors, do I have a mover and a seconder to approve Councillor Nation's leave of absence? Councillor Cusack and Councillor Byrne second. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the item?
No.
That's right. Okay. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We also have Councillor Serace has requested leave of absence from Tuesday the 24th of April till the 1st of May inclusive. Councillors, do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Gauci. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Confirmation of minutes. Councillors, do I have any opposition to any item of the minutes for the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday the 10th of April 2018? As there is no opposition, the minutes are confirmed. Declarations by councillors. Does any councillor have any conflict of interest in any of the items on the agenda tonight? Thank you, councillors. Presentations. Councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? Petitions and joint letters. Councillors, do we have any petitions or joint letters? Councillor Gauci.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a petition signed by 12 residents of Mountain, McCracken and Hedderwick Streets in Essendon requesting that Council change the prescribed nature strip tree.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to, jointly with Councillor Nicole Marshall, present a petition in regards to netball. It's the part 2 of what we presented 2 meetings ago, with an extra 1,139 signatures, which is a total of 2,639, and I'll let Councillor Marshall speak to the petition.
Just briefly, we discussed this last time, but this is a request from the number of individuals mentioned by Councillor Byrne, which is 2,639, to build a 4-court indoor stadium for multi-use for netball and basketball, and a minimum of 24 outdoor lit competition-compliant courts for netball, both with supporting amenities in Moonee Valley.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a petition signed by 7 residents of Corio and Aberfeldy Streets in Moonee Ponds requesting that Council modify current parking provisions to reduce congestion in the vicinity.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Reports by mayors and councillors. Do I have a motion? Councillor Gauci.
If I could move the reports with an administrative amendment.
Sure.
Just the item on 15 March for myself with the bees. I didn't attend.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marshall. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council reports. Council report 9.1 on tonight's agenda is on page 11 and relates to a planning application at 49 Railway Place West, Flemington. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. This is quite a long one, so you'll have to excuse me. Hopefully I don't run out of voice. Mayor, I'd like to move that Council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV 564/2017 to demolish buildings, remove trees and construct buildings and works comprising 5 dwellings in a heritage overlay with a reduction in visitor car parking requirements at number 49 Railway Place West, Flemington, in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1. The proposal fails to meet the overarching objective and the strategies of Clause 15015, cultural identity and neighbourhood character of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and would result in a development that fails to appropriately respond and contribute to neighbourhood character. 2. The proposal fails to meet the objectives and strategies contained within Clause 15031, heritage conservation, and Clause 21062, heritage of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and would result in a development that is not sympathetic and does not integrate with surrounding heritage buildings. 3. The visual bulk, scale, form and layout of the proposal fails to meet the objectives and strategies of Clause 21061, neighbourhood character, and Clause 21064, urban design, as it does not respect or contribute to the preferred character of the inner urban 1 precinct, and fails to appropriately respond to its location and surrounding context. 4. The proposal fails to satisfy the following standards contained within Clause 55, 2 or more dwellings on a lot of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and does not achieve an acceptable outcome in terms of the following objectives. A. Clause 55021, neighbourhood character. B. Clause 55025, integration with the street. C. Clause 55032, building height. D. Clause 55033, site coverage. E. Clause 55037, safety. F. Clause 55038, landscaping. G. Clause 55041, side and rear setbacks. H. Clause 55042, walls on boundaries. I. Clause 55046, overlooking. J. Clause 55048, noise impacts. K. Clause 55052, dwelling entry. L. Clause 55055, solar access to open space. M. Clause 55061, design detail. N. Clause 55062, front fences. And O. Clause 55064, site services. Number 5. The development would present a visually dominant and unsympathetic built form to the area and will have an unreasonable adverse effect on the residential amenity of neighbouring land. And 6, the proposal will cause adverse traffic and pedestrian safety impacts on the surrounding area, including the laneway and adjoining local road network, which will be substantial and unreasonable.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, this is a proposal to construct 5 dwellings at Railway Place West in Flemington. And originally it was for 5 triple-storey dwellings. It's now for 4 triple-storey and 1 double-storey dwelling. It's on 579 square metres of land, so as I'm talking, if councillors can perhaps think about what that looks like, because it's not an enormous parcel of land. And it's also really important to keep in mind that this is residentially zoned land too. For me, another really important factor with this is that this is not within the activity centre. And like a lot of the applications that we get, you can't help but feel that they desperately wish they were, and then we get a proposal which pretends that they're within the activity centre. And certainly this is something that if it was within the activity centre, I would be expecting something more along these lines. I will note that amended plans were lodged. There were significant concerns expressed at the consultation meeting in relation to the potential impact, almost a sheer wall, to one of the dwellings at the rear of this site, and that reduction to a 2-storey built form is a much better outcome. But you heard, Mayor, when I read out the Res Code assessment and how this application stacks up against Res Code. And we always have to keep in mind that Res Code is designed to help protect, if you like, the residential amenity, and if you have residentially zoned land, you have limitations that go along with that residential zoning. So I mentioned them, neighbourhood character, building height, I won't go through them again. But of the 30 standards that are applicable in this instance, this application either doesn't meet or only meets with conditions 50% of those applicable standards. So for me, I understand what the officers have sought to do via conditions, but I think it gets to the point where you start thinking, is this essentially a redesign of this building? And to my mind it is. The officers have proposed via conditions that we have things such as the height being reduced, a reduction in site coverage, and some pretty significant amendments to the proposal that I think when you look at it on balance, mean that really it ought to be refused rather than redesigned by our planners. Not only does it have poor design for the residents who live around the site, but certainly for the people who will live within the site if it was to be approved. And again, while I understand that the planners have sought to try and mitigate some of those impacts via the conditions, I just don't think it goes far enough. Just really briefly, the bulk and the scale of this is very concerning to me, and certainly, again, it's something that we see happen often, that you've got an application that almost pretends to just have one aspect. So this is pretended just to think about the railway line and the site next door, but it's forgotten what the rest of the neighbourhood looks like. And although I acknowledge that this is a non-contributory site within the heritage overlay, there are lots of properties around there that I think will be diminished if you've got a building of this bulk and scale plonked down on this particular site. And look, I'm mindful of the time, but I certainly think that, to borrow a phrase that Councillor Cusack uses every now and then, that I certainly think is appropriate in this instance, and that this does look from a design perspective to me like the back end of the Titanic, and I hope I haven't stolen that one from you for tonight. But it's certainly not something that will integrate into the neighbourhood, and as I said, I think it has the potential to be quite detrimental to the neighbourhood character of the area, and certainly to diminish the heritage value of other properties. So I would ask that councillors refuse this application. It's an overdevelopment. I certainly agree with the comments of the Heritage Advisor. They should have removed at least one dwelling, and if they had removed at least one dwelling and reduced the height of the dwelling at the back, I think that would have been a much better outcome. But in the current form, and despite the best endeavours of council's planners to deal with some of the areas of concern, I just don't think this goes far enough, and it should be refused.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall, for your comments. Just very quickly, and in support, obviously, of the motion, some observations. Councillor Marshall points out quite rightly that this development is not in the proximity of a activities centre, and in recent times there have been VCAT decisions made of similar developments, not even as large as these, in areas of Ascot Vale, that have pointed to this very fact, and the distance from the activity centre is important in this consideration. We also, while it's close to public transport, it's actually close to a railway line. It's not necessarily close to public transport, and there is a bit of a stroll and a walk, and if you live in that area, getting up to Mount Alexander Road for the tram, for instance, is a fair stretch. Getting down to Epsom Road for the tram is also a fair stretch. I don't know who in anybody's language would want to take the bus that goes up Francis Street unless you're just going to Footscray for fun. The other part of it, of course, is you can get to the railway station, but it's not just the simple answer of doing that. I absolutely agree that this is an overdevelopment. I follow the line and the logic of the Heritage Advisor, who suggests that this development tips the balance, if you like, and Councillor Marshall's quite right in saying that this is a non-contributory building in this area. However, the area is a sensitive heritage area with a lot of buildings around it, and if you put something like this in, you're diminishing that theme, I believe. And I think that the residential, the character, the neighbourhood character, is affected by this very thing. The question that I have in my mind also is how do we think about Res Code? I tend to think that Res Code talks about a max, not a minimum. So therefore, any development that comes to me that needs massive number of conditions and a significant number, as we have pointed out in our in this resolution to reject, I think there's 15 areas of concern, says to me that we're going to the very taking it right to the edge, and taking things right to the edge is not a way of describing how something should be done. It's to be done within this broad thing. Now, people will always say, oh, that's the letter of the law. But of course, we all know that that's not the spirit of what this is all about. The spirit of Res Code is to find a way to find a balance across a whole community and not to stretch it on 15 different points. And just to simply say again and to reiterate again that once you start moving into that space, you're really affecting neighbourhood character and amenity, and I think the heritage of the area is important.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? Councillor Marshall, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 9.2 on tonight's agenda is on page 42 and is entitled Proposed Budget 2018-2019. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marshall. Might have to lean forward, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's budget time, and as some people would say, this is the most exciting time of the year. It is for councillors and politicians anyway. Our Moonee Valley proposed budget this year seeks to balance the competing demands for council services and infrastructure. There is a proposed 2.25% increase to rate income, which, as we all know, we're in a rate-capped environment. Fees and charges for services have generally been increased between 4 and 6%. The proposed budget and council's financial plan provide an operating surplus of $11.4 million. Excluding capital grants and contributions, the underlying result, which is obviously a measure of financial sustainability, is anticipated to be a surplus of $5.9 million. The proposed budget includes an operating expenditure of $155.6 million. The council will commit significant funding to support various services for individuals and families in our community, including home care, personal care and respite care, childcare, kindergarten and maternal child and health. We will maintain roads, parks, footpaths, bike paths, drains, sporting fields, community buildings. There will be business support and networking programs. We will provide planning and building services, waste and recycling collections, and run a variety of environmental programs. The proposed budget also includes a capital works program of $45.3 million. The capital program includes $14 million invested in the development and renewal of council facilities, including $1.1 million to complete design and headworks for the state-of-the-art East Keilor Leisure Centre redevelopment, which I'll touch on later in this report. $1.7 million for the completion of Boeing Reserve Baseball Pavilion, $1.6 million for the completion of Ormond Park Football and Cricket Pavilion, $800,000 for the replacement of the synthetic surface at the Moonee Valley Athletics Centre, and $2.1 million for the new multi-purpose netball courts at Riverside Golf and Tennis Centre, which is in addition to the $1.5 million that the State MP for Essendon, Mr Danny Pearson, announced last week. That brings it to a total of $3.6 million going directly into a female-dominated sport, which I believe is this area's biggest ever investment in netball, which I can say is well overdue. There is also $6.1 million to upgrade our local road network and improve traffic flow safety, $1.7 million invested in drainage, and $3.9 million invested in open space, including $1.4 million on the Union Road streetscape improvement. I believe this is a financially responsible budget that will continue to assure Council's long-term financial strength. Within this budget document is also the very exciting update on the major capital works projects, being the East Keilor Leisure Centre, the Flemington Community Hub, and what no doubt, as per the petition we presented earlier, there are 2,500 plus people extremely excited about a highball facility. I'll start with the East Keilor Leisure Centre. We are well and truly underway with Council's biggest ever capital works project. Funding of $1.5 million was provided in the 17-18 budget to start the process, and in this draft budget an additional amount of just over $1.1 million is provided to finalise the design and documentation to facilitate tendering and awarding of a construction contract for the Leisure Centre. It is proposed that construction work will commence in the 1920 financial year. Yesterday, yourself, Mr Mayor, Councillor Sarace and I were thrilled to have the Minister for Support, the Honourable John Aaron, and the local Niddrie MP, the Honourable Ben Carroll, present a $3 million cheque towards our $50 million project. This money is greatly appreciated, and we look forward to positioning Moonee Valley Council as the council that the government wants to invest in, because we deliver fabulous projects. The Flemington Community Hub, I don't want to say too much about the Flemington Community Hub because I'm pretty sure the Moonee ward councillors will like to continue on that. But again, another extremely exciting project that will be coming in the near future. And now something really exciting that still needs a lot of I's dotted and T's crossed, but the Highball Stadium. Preliminary work has been undertaken to plan for a new Highball Stadium to meet the desperate needs of the basketball and netball community. This budget is exceptionally good for netballers. However, don't worry basketballers, because we are not going to leave you behind. As we saw with the petition earlier tonight, there is an outcry for a Highball Stadium. However, it is critically important to ensure that Council is financially responsible and maintains its financial sustainability. At this stage, we are hoping to be working on the project with it being delivered before 2025. An amount of $50,000 is proposed in this budget to commence master planning, where community consultation will occur to finalise a location for the proposed stadium. There is plenty of work to be done, however, we are moving in the right direction. So to explain the time delays, to complete 3 major projects within 5 years would have resulted in a high-risk rating and would strain Council's financial capacity to respond to unanticipated events and opportunities. Both the Flemington Community Hub and Highball Stadium are great projects to be partnering with state and federal government, which may enable the projects to be brought forward, because we know that 7 years is a long time to wait. But what is most important is that we have a plan going forward, backed by our MV 2040 document that we'll no doubt be hearing about later tonight. In releasing the proposed budget for public consideration, Council seeks community feedback. Public comment and submissions are encouraged and close 5 p.m. Monday the 25th of May. Submissions will then be heard on Tuesday the 5th of June. The proposed 18-19 annual budget will be placed on exhibition here at the Civic Centre, the Flemington Community Centre and our libraries across the
Would you like
municipality.
some extra time, Councillor?
Just one last sentence. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would also like to quickly thank fellow councillors and staff at Moonee Valley who have worked tirelessly in putting together this budget, as it's a big one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I might flag that I may request some extra time, but I'll speak very quickly. And thanks, Councillor Byrne, for a really comprehensive overview. I think that was a really useful and fulsome overview of where we're at with this budget, this draft budget, because one of the things that is often forgotten when we talk about our budget is the importance of the services we provide. There's often that real focus on the capital works, because that's sometimes the obvious things, the big buildings or the roadworks or whatever it might be. But we can't ever forget that one of the responsibilities of councils is to provide great services to our community, and sometimes those services are the only interaction that some of our ratepayers have with council. So again, as Councillor Byrne has mentioned, we've got our aged care services, our kinders. Anyone who's had any interaction with kinders in Moonee Valley knows how fabulous they are. And the maternal child health services, which are just, the nurses who work within those services are really quite remarkable. Again, the issue with waste, which is obviously on the forefront of all of our minds at the moment, but is an incredibly valued service, and there will certainly be a lot happening in that space. I am going to focus a little bit on Moonee, and won't speak too much because I'm sure Councillor Cusack will have a lot to say too about the Flemington Community Hub. But certainly we have money for streetscape works in Union Road and also Pin Oak Crescent, and that reflects the planning that has been done in relation to those two areas. More broadly, we also have $6 million proposed for the purchase of new or expanded open space, and a couple of years ago I was quite critical, as I can be at times, about the fact that we have large amounts of money sitting there which has not been expended, and I'm so pleased that we're actually starting to spend that money for the purpose which it is sitting there, and the land acquisition, and we are spending it responsibly, but it should have been spent beforehand, but at least I suppose the words better late than never come to mind. Certainly we've got the money for various roadworks and the implementation of measures that have been agreed to by our community through the local area traffic management studies. So it's really pleasing to see that we'll be able to knock some of those things off. There's also a number of sporting lights that are being funded in this. We have the female facilities at the Essendon Rowing Club, which is, again, really important. Money towards the planning for the Moonee Ponds car park, wherever that may end up being, but that is at the moment, given the amount of construction going on in Moonee Ponds in the activity centre a really vital thing that we're planning for. We have works in Queen's Park towards a new wetland stormwater harvesting system, which will be great. Shared path upgrades, including around the Dean Street underpass and also the Evans Street entry to Moonee Ponds Creek. I do again reflect Councillor Burns or echo her sentiments in relation to the netball. So the fact that we're putting in $2.1 million and in conjunction with the additional $1.5 million received from the state government. Now, I've really reflected, I think it was 2 budgets ago now, I remember seeing on the front of the Leader this wonderful article talking about the support the Moonee Valley had put forward for female sports. And I have to say, as I reflected on that, I don't know what the feeling was, maybe it was a bit of embarrassment almost, because the fact that we had been so negligent for so many years in actually supporting the sport, that, it's true, Mayor, in supporting the sport that most women and girls play. It really, I remember thinking about that, thinking we are letting down the netballers, and you just have to go to Aberfeldy and you see the 2 change rooms, so in total 2 change rooms and 2 toilets that hundreds and hundreds of girls each Saturday stroll through, and there is not another sport in Moonee Valley that would have put up with that for as long as they have. So certainly the idea of having the courts and then putting in the infrastructure to support that is absolutely essential. And you know what? I think we can really be proud of our support of women's sport and girls' sport with this particular budget. The priorities one is always a difficult one, because of course we would all like to do everything now, and we acknowledge the importance of these projects. And certainly East Keilor, again, we know it needs to be done desperately, and we're at the point where we either do it or it's shut down, and that's just the situation we're in. So obviously a lot of planning's gone into that. But with the Flemington Community Hub, we have a significant amount of money in the budget to get that planning process underway. And for many years now, we've spoken about how the hub, or the community centre as it now is at end of life, and it absolutely is. You just have to walk on those wooden boards to feel, am I going to fall through? And it's, I know there have been a range of issues there, and the community centre, as it is at the moment, needs to be transformed, and it needs to be a facility which services the needs of both our most disadvantaged people, and we know the CEFA index shows time and time again that we have a significant area of disadvantage at the Flemington Public Housing Estate. But it also needs to meet the needs of so many other people around Flemington and Travancore. And really would like to think that a genuine community hub, so something where you put your imaginative hats on, not the traditional community centre where you've got a range of meeting rooms that you sort of let people in and out, but a real hub that services a range of people and people's needs, the arts, some sport, meeting rooms, cultural centres, all that sort of stuff that we can do as part of this planning process. It is going to be fabulous. There's a lot of work to be done, but I am so pleased that we have got the ball rolling with this. Very briefly, I'm going to say it's stopped counting, so does that mean I just keep talking, or no? No?
59.
Okay. I'm mindful too about the long-term capital works plan, and would strongly recommend that people have a look at this, because this sets out the plan, set for to 2039-40 to link in with MV 2040. And in there is basically what is anticipated to be the full range of capital works projects that we may need to do over that period of time, together with an indication of the time frame at this stage, and also the dollar range, if you like, of what that will be. So please, if you don't want to wade through the budget, even if you just have a look at that plan itself and just work out whether we've got everything and what you think of it. And please, as always, put in a submission.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of observations of the budget, and it's only in draft form, and for that I'm grateful at this stage. And a lot of good work has gone into that, and I commend the officers on that work. However, there are a couple of issues that flag to me that responsibility and sustainability particularly needs to be something we need to be very mindful of, and something that concerns me greatly. In the report from the council officer, there was under the financial analysis the interest payable on the funds that the council will have to borrow over the next few years, over the 7 years anyway. The interest payable varies depending on the amount borrowed, obviously, but ultimately we'll be paying upwards of $33 million just in interest alone over that period. Now, that is a very high amount of interest to be paying for any organisation, and one that flags to me, well, you know, we've just got to be a little bit more prudent about these high-end investments within the municipality. No doubt these three projects are noteworthy. The EKLC, the East Keilor Leisure Centre, Flemington Community Centre and the Highball Stadium, all commendable, all commendable. I don't sit here and condone them. I'm just suggesting that maybe, and the funds are over a period, but even still, $101 million loaned and a $33 million interest bill is a lot for this municipality to be considering. And I'm always very mindful of those things. What's the return on I'm a business person and I can't help but see things that way. What's the return on our investment? And I know councils play around with those sort of comments, but it's difficult for me to get my head around the fact that we've got to borrow so much money and then hope that we can pay it back. I haven't seen a return on investment at all, outside of we may break even after 3 years. And that to me says, well, financial sustainability, big question mark, big question mark. Forgetting that for 1 second, I will reflect on some of the business promotion aspects of this this budget, and the delivering of the Winter Festival in Moonee Ponds, which hopefully will give that trading area a real fillip, because it needs it in the winter time. Their poorest trading time is during that June, July, when it's cold and miserable.
Would you like an extension, councillor?
I'll thank just a short extension. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that's a great thing for that area. And if it pays dividends, then I hope, and I sincerely hope, that we can replicate this type of promotion in some of the other trading areas. Other things in the long term include the reinvigoration of the Airport West industrial area, which, as we all know, certainly needs it. The laneway lighting in Moonee Ponds, and the beautification of the public realm around Union Road. Also, I'd just like to commend Council on the public Wi-Fi that we're trialling at the moment in North Essendon. Well, it hasn't started yet, but it will, and the potential rollout of that over the municipality. They're just some of the ongoing things that Council has implemented, and I think if we can promote business more, we can employ more people in our municipality, and for that we can be grateful as a municipality. So I just am, and I'll say it again, I'm just concerned about the funds that this council is borrowing. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillor? Councillor Cusack.
I'm more than happy to see this budget go out for community consultation. It is a budget that has been underpinned by extensive research and evidence in respect of a number of things, in particular the financial planning aspects, what it might look, what the condition of our finances are as a council in the out years, especially in respect of the questions of redoing the Essendon Keilor Leisure Centre and Flemington Community Centre. I note in the officer's report that while there was consideration to try and do the three, that is those two plus the Highball in a more concertinaed period of time, that is rejected by the officers as being terribly unsafe for council. It's a high-risk move, and it doesn't allow us any contingencies for other things that may come online or things that council may wish to do. So the option that is being proposed is actually a much more middle-of-the-road one, and spread over that period of time is a much lower medium risk proposition, and it's at the bottom end of medium risk. Having said that the budget is also underpinned by research around its financial position, it's also very much underpinned by significant documents. 2040 is one. It has, for the first time, a really detailed long-term plan for what will be rolled out in this municipality to reflect 2040, which may at times over the course of the next 20 years vary, of course, depending on other priorities, but it is actually a way to go forward. It also is a budget that for the first time really talks about and is underpinned by work around the diversity of need of this municipality. Apart from sport, and we've heard from previous speakers about the need for resources in that area for young women to participate, and women generally, because from my perspective it's always about community health and well-being and connectedness, and it's not everybody is going to be a gold medal winner at the next games, whatever those games may be. It's more about saving many, many millions of dollars, because you don't have young children being obese, you don't have all of the issues to do with diabetes and those other chronic diseases in our community. In fact, I was just noting today, fellow councillors, that the stats are coming out about the population size of Melbourne compared to Sydney, and the gap has closed substantially. Sydney has 5.1 mil, we have 4.9, and the general standard across the world is that a large city is 5 million people.
Would you like some extra time, Councillor?
If I could, thank you very much, Mayor. That 5 million we have a share in, and we have to think now in a budget about how we're going to address that kind of growth. If we sit still and static, we will be forever condemned for just fixing up some holes in a road or picking up the rubbish. We need to address a whole swag of issues that come in as a result of that. And I just, in my indulgence, if you don't mind, Mayor, but I think important for community to understand that, as I said before, this budget goes to and addresses a number of other priorities in our community. The priorities about making our city fair and safe, and the values and how it values diversity and housing accessibility, about gender equity and prevention of violence against women, about creating active transport so that people can actually use the damn things when they need it, about our mental health and alcohol and other drugs. And we have an epidemic of problems with young people in this community around mental health, and it's higher than the state average. It is about other questions of reducing inequalities across the board for all sorts of people. It's about employment, and it's about creating our livable neighbourhoods that we talk about, that people were passionately talking about only on item 9.1 in tonight's agenda. And it also is about addressing things that are coming to us via the Commonwealth, things like the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So, and just a couple of the quick highlights that have already been raised. We've got in this budget, we're implementing the Thriving Minds Youth Mental Health Program through our schools. We've got $650,000 over the next 2.5 years for the Flemington Community Revitalisation Project, which is a partnership with both state government and also philanthropic organisations, addressing the high level of social economic needs and employment opportunities. We're starting the work, the very early work on getting the Flemington Community Centre up, $150,000 to look at some of that, and also to deliver a community hub on Union Road where there isn't anything of that ilk at present. But there are long-term plans to push both the thriving mines and obviously the Flemington Community Centre as well. And in the question of inclusion and diversity and equity and access, that whole area around our connection to land and Aboriginal people is also found a place in this budget. We're delivering an integrated youth counselling and case management service within this budget, and we've also got $200,000, or a little bit more than that actually, to improve the accessibility of the Crown Street stable so that people who have ambulatory issues can get up to the next floor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to speak? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll try not to repeat anything that my fellow councillors have eloquently described. So I'll just speak about Buckley Ward in particular. So we've got some great things happening. Some of the highlights, just to mention a few, the new car park at Strathnaver Reserve, the Buckley Park Sports Pavilion, the Burring Reserve Baseball Pavilion and batting nets, the new pavilion at Cross Keys, the resurfacing of the Moonee Valley Athletics track, which I'm sure will be very welcome. But personally, I'm particularly happy to see the relocation of the Settlers Cottage to Woodlands Park. It's taken me a few years to get to this point, but I'm very, very glad to be here and that Council has saved the oldest building, the oldest surviving example of the Gold Rush era. This building will be located within Woodlands Park and will eventually be opened up for community use, so it's certainly a good result for all. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Gauci.
I promise to equally keep it brief, given I've now drawn lines through services, infrastructure, capital works and major projects. So I promise to not rehash most things. I think the bit I wanted just to make people aware of, given that it is something that we consistently hear from residents is important, is that roads and rubbish are still a very big focus for us. So there's $13 million on rubbish and $36 million in infrastructure, including $7 million on roads. They are still a very, very big focus for us. Importantly, to discuss the earlier point that was raised, this year's budget doesn't actually propose any borrowings. So I know that the future works and the major projects do have an element of borrowing, but for this year's budget there are no borrowings. It is a sensible and practical plan that helps us deliver our major projects in a responsible and sustainable way, particularly for me in terms of the future communities portfolio. There's work in there, particularly to have the Moonee Valley 2040 strategy embedded in the planning scheme, but equally the projects that we deliver over the long-term capital works program all feed into the long-term strategy that we have for our municipality. And I'm also really pleased to see the activation of spaces through public arts and creative interventions, programming of events and activities. That's something that was really important to me when I ran, and I'm really pleased to see that these are in the budget. And as has already been mentioned, this is just a draft budget. This is for your feedback. This is your opportunity to make submissions, so please take that opportunity. I know that reading the budget is not particularly sexy or exciting for most people, but this is your ratepayer money that's being spent, so have a read and give us your feedback.
Thank you, Councillor. I would just like to say a few words before I go to the closing argument. This council is embarking on a very big investment this year and in the next couple of years. And the reason why is we have a lot of properties and a lot of facilities that have come to the end of life term. And you know, we've put some of them off for a while, but now we've put a package together where we are financially responsible, and I believe we'll be delivering a lot of good, great projects for this community. And always, council's always referred to about the 3 R's, roads, rates and rubbish. Well, I think this year for us at Moonee Valley, I think it's the 4 R's now. So it'll be roads, rates, rubbish and recreation, because that's where a lot of our capital is going towards. But I look forward to this. I look forward to seeing the fruits of this budget coming to fruition. And it's also good to see that the state government, like Councillor Burns said, the state government is investing in Moonee Valley as well. And when you've got the state government investing in you, that means that you are on a good thing. And I am a hard taskmaster, but a fair one. So I think, Mr. Lambert, you'll be having a very busy year, a very busy couple of years over the next few years in delivering a lot of these projects to fruition. Thank you very much. Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. They're very good remarks. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. I think everyone around this table brought up some really good and important points. We have to be financially sustainable, and Councillor Lawrence, I think you really pointed out some interesting facts in terms of how much interest we will be repaying, and it is sort of a scary figure, but the officer's recommendation is to potentially over time borrow 86 million with a repayment of 28 million, as opposed to the 101 and 33, and that is a big number. But this is just a draft budget, and that's not including state and federal potential funding that hopefully by putting it out there we might actually be able to have. In terms of council, we don't have any debt, which is quite rare for councils. There are very few that actually don't have any debt. So we're probably in this position now that we have to renew so many of our facilities because we never went into debt previously. So as Councillor Cusack said, we were still in static. And now we've got 3 major projects that we have to do. We can't really go on without them. So we're in a good position. We're going to put it out there. As Councillor Gauchi has said, it's a draft where we want the feedback and we'll go forward from here. But it's an exciting time, and I hope heaps and heaps of people put in their feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those in favour?
Councillor Sharp, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sypeck, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauchi.
All those against?
Councillor Lawrence.
That is carried. Council Report 9.3 on tonight's agenda is on page 49 as entitled Moonee Valley 2040 Draft Strategy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Gauchi.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Gauchi, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mayor. I am really so excited to be able to move the draft Moonee Valley 2040 strategy. I don't know how the camera works, but I'm sure they will zoom pan and add a link. This builds on nearly 2 years of work and over 2,000 ideas from 4,500 participants. The Moonee Valley 2040 strategy sets the policy framework and strategic directions for everything we will do and try to achieve over the next 20 years in order for us to deliver on our vision that in 2040 Moonee Valley will be a great place to live, work and visit, strengthened by a network of 20-minute neighbourhoods. These neighbourhoods allow people at all stages of their life to live locally, accessing most of their needs close to home. So our neighbourhoods will be beautiful, sustainable and have strong community connections which enable citizens and the environment to be healthy and resilient. This will be achieved through neighbourhood planning and initiatives, which you can see in the strategy and the appendix, if you want the short version, the appendix of the council report. This long-term planning enables us to plan the delivery of these ideas during the period between now and 2040, which is 22 years and it is a really long time. But this is the way for us to be sensible and pragmatic and deliver across our municipality the future of forever. The framework is structured around the themes of fair, thriving, connected, green and beautiful, with targets, ideas and initiatives across all these areas. So we would love everyone to read the draft strategy and let us know if the objectives and actions will make the Moonee Valley of 2040 a place that you want to live, work, play and invest in. So we would love you to have a read and give us your feedback before the 18th of May 2018 on the link on our website.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks very much for that useful overview, Councillor Gauchi. And I think if we reflect on why we're here doing this process, so going through this very long process, it's probably fair to say that our previous long-term strategic plan was deficient. And that's not a criticism, that's just a reality of how things shift and an acknowledgement now about how to do planning well. We need a long-term strategic vision that reflects on the fact that things have changed significantly, and Councillor Cusack referred to the significant population growth that Melbourne is experiencing. And I heard recently, I don't know whether it's still the case, that we're certainly one of the fastest growing in the world, and I think at one stage we were the fastest growing city of the world. Good or bad, that is what it is. And to the extent we are not able to influence births or immigration policy in Moonee Valley Council, we need to recognise what we're dealing with. I think for me the thing I do like about Moonee Valley 2040, and I wouldn't say I agree with everything in there, but it's very rarely that you would agree with everything in a document like this. But I like the idea of planning on a neighbourhood basis. And I remember very early on as a councillor, there just seemed to me a real flaw in the thinking that you could apply the same brush to Ascot Vale as you could to East Keilor. Our neighbourhoods are so different, and we need to recognise that, and our planning needs to recognise that. They're not good or bad, they are just different. So as Councillor Gauci-Marici said, this is looked at as a series of neighbourhoods, and
13.
Absolutely, 13 neighbourhoods, unlucky for some. So after
Baker's dozen.
After a very extensive consultation process, and it has been extensive to date, we are now putting this draft out on consultation. And again, if you're someone who likes the abridged version, you don't have to read through the whole document. You can simply flick to your neighbourhood, which is like this, and you can get a real sense of what is anticipated for your neighbourhood, and that information is based on census data and forecasts that are not made up by Moonee Valley Council. But also what's important here is the idea of having anchors for your neighbourhood and having things which bring neighbourhoods together, and to really sit there and think, all right, well, in 2040, all those years down the track, which will come around quickly enough, is this a way that my neighbourhood could work? Is this the way that my neighbourhood should work? I think it's important to, as this goes out on consultation, for people to feedback whether there is anything obvious that we have missed. You would hope that, having been through the extensive consultation processes to date, there is not. But I'm always mindful that people can sometimes come up with fabulous ideas, and I'm almost done, Councillor Mayor Sypek. But for me, the important thing too with this is that there has been a real focus, which I really do appreciate, on making sure that this is implemented. It's not yet another plan that people are consulted about, and to the point where they go, I don't want to hear any more about it, and then it sits on a shelf somewhere. There is a very clear process for implementing MV 2040 if it should be approved. And as Councillor Gauci-Marici mentioned, certainly for it to form part of our planning scheme, and for it to form the basis of a number of other planning things that we'll be looking at over this council term and the next council term too.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Cusack.
I'd love to, because I've sat in this council for many years, and we've never had the opportunity to create the lighthouse where people can see or get a bit of a vision about where Moonee Valley is going to as a place. We have made many mistakes, possibly, I think we have, and so on like that. And people talk about local government not being totally attuned or doing things ad hoc, and we see that in the newspapers. So Moonee Valley has drawn a line in the sand. Not many other councils have gone down this track or had the guts to actually have a deep, deep look at itself, its people, and most of all to do this sort of planning with the people of Moonee Valley, not telling people about how to do it. Many thousands of people have participated in lots and lots of activities over a long period of time, and fair play to the staff who dreamt this up and got it going and gave us the kick along to actually start really thinking about this very deeply. And I just keep, and I love coming back to this plan, and I keep thinking about, we arrived at 3 or 5 big themes about Moonee Valley. We talked about, ultimately out of all of the consultation, people wanted to see in 2040 a fair place. They wanted to see a thriving place. They wanted to see a connected place. They wanted to see a green place. They wanted to see something beautiful about Moonee Valley, the place that is theirs, that's in their heart, in their mind. And for the children that aren't born yet, what this might bring to everybody. But that all gets wrapped up in one very big important word. They want Moonee Valley to be a healthy place. And that notion of health is a factor of many, many things. And the beauty of this statement is that it does all of that. It brings some of the hard edge about sort of what you've got to do in planning. It says you've got to build this. It says that you've got to do those sorts of things. And that's what the community has said they need. I know that there's always something else that's on the horizon. I mean, crikey, the digital age is changing our world every 2 seconds, and we've got to be able to be nimble enough and flexible enough to bring that into play. Not my job, I'm afraid, future councils. But somewhere along the line, this is the anchor for good decision making, for good advocacy, for making sensible decisions about where we go to next time. It's only a couple of years away and this council will be going through another election. There'll be new councillors sitting around a table thinking, how are we going to put together the next 4-year plan? I've been confronted by that several times over. To have a document like this, a seminal document like this that can give some of that direction is just an absolutely precious thing. I want everybody in the community, in a utopian sort of sense, to read this report on it and give us something back. But I think there's a little bit in everything. On the neighbourhoods, don't get stuck on the names. Don't get stuck on the postcodes. Flemington, no, only a second. Flemington doesn't mean 3031. Flemington is a much broader game in this. We had to look at some way of describing Moonee Valley in a more granular way, but we couldn't go right down to streetscapes. Thank you very much, and I applaud this.
Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. We're obviously a fair way through this process, and I've spoken quite comprehensively on MV 2040 before, so I'll keep it brief. But I just wanted to say, as Councillor Cusack touched on before, just a big thank you to the staff, particularly Jessie Keating, who has been an absolute champion in this space, and Rebecca Gauci-Marici, who's the leader of the PAC group, the MV 2040 PAC group, because I know that there's a lot of really interested people who have helped put this together, and so much work has gone in, so I just want to make sure that those people aren't missed. Thank you, and sorry, Beck, if I stole what you said.
You actually stole my thunder as well, Councillor Byrne, but I just also... Sorry? Okay. I'd just also like to recognise our 2 staff members, Natalie and Jess, for their outstanding work in putting this whole package together. I mean, this is a lot of data, a lot of information. It was collated beautifully. It's been presented magnificently, easy to read. Yeah, it's easy to read, and I just want to say, as the Mayor and Councillors, we thank you for your hard work and great leadership in this space. Thank you. Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, I think I'm the last councillor to speak, and I might be slightly the odd one out in regards to just my thoughts on setting such a plan for 22 years. Look, I do understand and recognise the need for a long-term plan, and I certainly concur with all the councillors that have spoken so far on this issue. I guess I just want to flag my concerns about setting a plan for 22 years, because as a number of councillors have already said, things can change rapidly, and certainly sometimes very, very rapidly. So I will reserve my thoughts until I receive community feedback, because I'm not sure that the wider community have really had the chance to really look and really get into the real meat of this and detail of this document, and there's certainly a lot of that. So please, I encourage our residents to please have a good hard look at this strategy, and please provide feedback, because it is going to be vital for us when it comes back to us after the community consultation period closes.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp, and you make some very good points there. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and Councillor Sharp, you're not the last.
Oh, sorry.
I commend the draft document, and it is only draft, but I implore, and I take Councillor Sharp's point, implore the residents to ask the hard questions. And every councillor in this chamber would know that the issues that really get on the goat of a lot of our residents, parking, number one. Every blessed day just about somebody's asking you, what are you doing about parking? Does MV40 address that? Ask that question. Transport issues. Are we looking at the movement of our vehicles, bikes, pedestrians throughout the municipality? Ask that question. Development issues. Again, a real red flag for a lot of residents. And the planning that goes into that and so forth. So I just ask the residents to ask the hard questions of MV40 because we want a document that's going to answer those questions. And it's a very thick document, as we can see. It's not an encyclopedia, but it's War and Peace anyway. And it's an important document for us, but we have to be mindful that it does the job that we want it to do. And residents have a right to ask the hard questions, and I ask them to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Gauci, would you like to close?
Well, thank you. Certainly, I thank the fellow councillors for all of their feedback. I had left the staff comment till my closing, but they have stolen my thunder on that. For those who have engaged in the consultation process with our staff, the incredible thing is that Jessie particularly, but the team and Natalie have lived and breathed 2040 and are incredibly passionate about where Moonee Valley will be in 20 years from now. And it is such an exciting thing to see how passionate they are about your future in our community. That certainly they deserve the worlds of accolade for their support on this. In terms of the feedback that we've had around long-term versus short-term planning, I can certainly say that whether we look at local, state or federal government, significant problems occur when we only think about our term and when we only think about the short-term future. For me, I didn't join council to think about the next 4 years. I joined council to ensure that we have a vision that we deliver on for the next 20 years and that we plan strategically in a way that gets us there. And if we make short-sighted decisions, then we will be in a position where 20 years from now we'll still be having the same conversations about the same facilities falling apart. So for me, this is a long-term strategic plan that can be underpinned by the 4-year council cycles and underpinned by annual budgets that have the flexibility to take into account some of the things that come up. Certainly the old adage of you fail to plan, you plan to fail is really important here. This is about us planning for the future of our municipality. So I am really excited every time I walk down to Leake Street or Napier Street to think about what this neighbourhood would look like in 20 years from now, and if it's the neighbourhood I want to live, work and play in. And I hope our community can be just as excited about thinking about our neighbourhoods like that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.4 on tonight's agenda is on page 59 as entitled Moonee Valley 2040 Green Action Plan, Carbon, Urban Forest, Water and Waste. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gauci. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the item?
Thanks, Mayor. It's fair to say the people of Moonee Valley will have a lot of reading to do over the coming months, and I really hope that they do that reading. These are some plans that are actually going out on consultation also, and they are what has been termed green action plans, and they form part of the MV 2040 document. As I mentioned in the debate in relation to MV 2040, the important part about it is that it's actually going to be implemented. It's not going to be something that constantly generates more policies. It's going to be something that we get off our backsides and actually put into play once, assuming again, it is approved. So these 4 plans are actually going out, as I said, on consultation. We have a waste, carbon, urban forest and water plan. And the thing I like about these, again, you have clear targets. So this is not just wishy-washy, airy-fairy language. It is clear targets and clear actions to help us achieve those targets. Very briefly, I'll just mention some of the key parts of the particular action plans, and I will note too that my EnviroPack has reviewed or had feedback into these, which is great, and we have lots of people who have lots of significant knowledge around these particular environmental issues. And I suppose before I go on to them, it's important to keep in mind too that these are not the niche areas that they once upon a time would have been viewed as. I think it's really important the people of Moonee Valley, regardless of their political persuasion or other views on the world, realise the importance of looking after our environment and of really being mindful about how we use our resources. And I think that these plans are very cognizant of that. So we have our water sensitive city, and that again has clear targets, and that includes things around the reduction of total stormwater discharge, reduction around indoor and outdoor potable water usage, having all our sports fields and priority parks irrigated with alternative water supplies by 2040, which again is something that if we can achieve that will be absolutely magnificent on a range of fronts. We have our zero carbon action plan, and the idea of achieving zero net carbon emissions by 2040. Again, a fabulous goal, and I love the fact that we have set high bars, but I know that we will do everything we can within our power to achieve them. The commitment to zero net carbon emissions from our own operations by 2020, and also reducing emissions by over 95% by 2040. Excuse me, one of the ones that I really love is the goal to power all of Council's operations by 100% renewable energy, which if you think about what that looks like, again, is something for me that's incredibly exciting. Waste and resource recovery, again, for a whole range of reasons. This is at the forefront of people's mind. Certainly the War on Waste series, I think for people who might have even not really turned their mind to waste, made them think about it a bit differently. And we, again, the things we can be proud of, certainly as a council, have been on the front foot in relation to the issue of single-use plastics, which I think we can be very proud of. The idea about having zero food waste to landfill by 2030, if you think about that and how much currently goes into landfill that could be, I know that not a lot of people don't like the term diverted, but I'll use it.
Harvested.
Yeah, we'll call it harvested. Making sure, again, that 90% of household waste does not end up in landfill. I like about the action plan that there's a real focus too, not just about on diverting waste and sending it to other places, but about actually reducing the amount of waste that is produced in the first instance, and that's where our thinking really has to start shifting. The plan looks at improving recycling and organic waste collections, and certainly acknowledging too that we've got lots of people now who are living in apartments, and lots of people certainly by 2040 who will be living in apartments, and how we make sure that those people have the opportunity to make sure that their food waste doesn't end up in landfill. And we discussed a couple of weeks ago that issue too with our guidelines in relation to waste management. And that feeds into another part of the plan, which is very much around how we look at it from a planning perspective, because obviously we have tools within planning that can help manage waste quite effectively. The last one is the urban forest plan, and that incorporates the tree management plan too. And I think, again, regardless of your views of the world, most people in Moonee Valley really value our trees. And we have a wonderful goal to try and increase the tree canopy cover from, currently it's about 11.5% to 30%. And if you just think about what that looks like, if you project yourself forward to 2040 and think about what a 30% tree canopy cover looks like, it will be city changing, there's no doubt about that. Obviously, we will do all we can on our land, but I'm almost done. That went very quickly. But also too, we have tools that we can use to make sure that on private land that people are required to plant and required to maintain that planting, and that's work that we'll need to do. But for me, one of the big things that we need to do is change our activity centres from the concrete jungles that they are and green them up. And it's not having your token green walls, it's about genuine tree planting in our activity centres. And we should have done it a long time ago, but again, better late than never. I'll continue to talk, but I'm mindful that you're giving me the mayor eyes, so I will sit down.
We'll have time to close. Thank you, Councillor Gauci.
I promise to keep it super brief, given Councillor Marshall spoke very comprehensively. Certainly the feedback that we had during the 2040 consultation was that people want to live in a city that is healthy, that is green, and that is resilient. And this is how we deliver that. So this is about the priority areas, the water sensitive, the zero carbon, waste and resource recovery in urban forests, but setting actually deliverable and measurable targets and actions to make sure it happens. So this is again out for consultation and your feedback, and we would really look forward to hearing what you think of it. And with your grace, Mr. Mayor, I noticed that in my remiss last section, forgot to say my portfolio committee for 2040 were awesome too. So thank you for your enthusiasm.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Cusack.
I'll sit down, Mayor, because I've just realised, of course, that I'm under flying instructions not to have everybody just watch the back of my head while this video streaming is going on. So apologies to any of the audience out there who have been bewildered by what they see. I'm bewildered what's inside of it sometimes. There was a mention a little while ago of council's traditional view of people's traditional view of the world is around roads, rates and rubbish. And if we continue down that sort of track and whatever they might mean, we find ourselves probably running into a cul-de-sac. A lack of ideas and a lack of capacity in this municipality to be able to attune ourselves to more dense living, to people who are living in high-rise or apartment-style living, to the needs of young people in the future, to changes that are happening in all sorts of industries that are being forced to change because of environmental issues and so on. And of course we all know, because it's been on the front pages of the papers, the extraordinary issues around waste management and the operation of waste. So it's very timely that we actually put into place now some policies that reflect all of those. But I just did off the back of the cigarette packet, politically correct, stupid, off the back, a really quick calculation while I was sitting here. And other people might like to do that when they have a look at these policies and think about how they line up with roads, rates and rubbish. And I just thought for a minute, in the roads world, we're talking about the urban forest. We're talking about how the urban forest on our public roads, in our nature strips, an increase from 11.5% to 30% cools our neighbourhoods. We see heat maps of how the western suburbs of Melbourne are so much hotter than the eastern suburbs. What does that do? It saves water. It also means that in terms of climate, it is a significant factor. It means that, for instance, when people are suffering, elderly people are suffering really hot days, they can actually go outside and still be able to enjoy the outside but have refuges in a forested type of environment. Rates, all four of them line up beautifully in either affecting our rates in a very positive way, to reduce the use of water, to look at how waste management can be done in the future. There is a hard little question in that waste management one, which talks about the transfer station. Are we totally wedded to a system of waste management that just looks like that? Or are we talking about something that is much more invigorated and has a capacity to look to the next generations? And so there's questions about how we use and collect waste and manage it and so on like that, that have a direct connection to our waste. I mean, the Chinese are knocking it back, so we've got a question in all of that. So the 4 areas come up there. And in terms of rubbish, of course, we're worried about waste, we're worried about carbon, and we're worried about climate.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Marshall, would you like to close?
That's right, Mayor. I will remain silent.
I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.5 of tonight's agenda is on page 65 and entitled Advocacy Strategy 2018-2021. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you. I'm just pulling it up. So, I mentioned earlier that I have a tendency to be critical about things at times. And it's fair to say that one thing I have been very critical about is the way that Moonee Valley has done advocacy. We have done it very poorly, in my view, and we have done it with little success often. And that's because we have been very unsophisticated and not the slightest bit strategic about how we've done advocacy. We've thrown things out there hoping that they'll hit the target, and often without any level of rigour around it, without data, without evidence to support our position, without doing what this plan seeks to do, this strategy, which is align ourselves with the priorities of the other levels of government. And, you know, one of the great things in life, you can choose to focus on the things you can't control, or you can focus on the things that you can. And advocacy is about those things that we can't control directly, but it is trying to influence. And that is why we need to be sophisticated in the way that we do it. You know, there's no point having all these wonderful ideas out there and putting these asks that we know are never going to be achieved. We waste resources, we waste time, and we set ourselves and our community up for disappointment. So that's why we need to be very clear. And I'm really pleased to see that we now have the advocacy strategy, which sets out a range of priorities, and you can see what they are. Obviously, the Flemington Community Hub, East Kill Leisure Centre, Riverside, tennis and golf, the Moonee Ponds Junction and bus interchange, Maribyrnong River Bridge, Moonee Ponds Creek revitalisation, and obviously the tree canopy. And quite a number of those already we've managed to have success in without even approving our strategy, and that is because we have been strategic and we have been sensible in the way we've approached it. Think about the items that are in here, and I think, as I said, what I've liked about that is that we are being realistic and we are being very focused in the way that we do our advocacy. There are a number of other matters that are mentioned in the report, and they are also very important. But again, this is about trying to think about how we focus in the lead up to elections, our energy and our efforts. But the matters that are outlined in there, certainly the Highball Stadium, the Maribyrnong River Cultural Precinct, Windy Hill, and the Melbourne Airport Rail Link, and obviously the other traffic projects and transport projects that are mentioned there in relation to the intersections. They are really important projects, and they are ones that we will continue to advocate on. But I hope this is a start of a new approach to advocacy in Moonee Valley, because the old way hasn't worked, and if we think we are going to continue to do that and just rant and rave and, as I said, just throw things out there and hope they hit a target, it won't work, and we need to be more considered. So I'm pleased that we've got this, and as I said, I hope it's the start of a new approach in Moonee Valley.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack.
Well, I'm going to wax lyrical for 2 secs. I reckon that this council, in the last couple of years, has done more to move Moonee Valley along than has happened in many, many years.
Last 6 months.
And it's something of a reforming council, and I really appreciate all the effort that's been done. And we've talked about 2040 at some length before, and I hope that those who are listening got a sense of how we've all been enthused by it. Whether there's little hairy bits around it, hey, that's okay. I mean, every long-term plan has a problem. But in terms of the advocacy, this has fallen out of that very, very specific stuff that we did in 2040. It's fallen out of the really rigorous research that we've been doing on what our community is after and needs. So we now actually have a plan that is part of the whole connected up thing. And by having an advocacy plan is not about shooting for the stars on anything that we feel like. We now actually have a plan that is based on solid evidence, research, how it will work operationally, and we can take that to somebody, whether it is government, business, philanthropy, to create partnerships, to create collaborations in things, or maybe even to suggest to somebody else, this is your role, how are you going to go about doing it, and we'll come in and support in certain ways. And all of those sorts of things are possible when you've got an advocacy plan. When you don't have one, you've got an advocacy what? I don't know. So anyway, I think that, and I just want to highlight what's on that advocacy plan. Questions around transport that have been right at the forefront of everything we do in Moonee Valley. We really have got an idea that we want to get that Moonee Ponds junction and interchange fixed up. It's got to be done. There's also the Maribyrnong Bridge, which is just a critical piece of infrastructure that needs to be worked through in our neighbourhood. And you can see the other ones that are hanging there that have also either a environmental or the leisure recreation aspect to them. But there's also those 4 that are also there that are potential runners off the interchange bench. And just draw your eyes to those. There's the netball and basketball highball stadium, and that has been talked about. But there's also that notion of how do we start off all of those little projects that ultimately build up to being the Maribyrnong River Cultural Precinct. How do we actually change the Maribyrnong River to be something that is not just it's beautiful as a passive thing, but it can be something that a whole community can enjoy in many different ways. And there's lots of little ideas and ways to do that. So Windy Hill is a challenge for us. The rail link, of course, is big time, as we all know. And of course, there are a number of key traffic and transport projects that will also be part ultimately of the advocacy plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? I'll just step in and say a few words as well. I tend to disagree with you, Councillor. I believe that this new council, when we got elected in 2016, I think we did have a very good strategy and advocacy strategy, but I think it just wasn't led well, or we didn't implement it quite well. But I think in 2018, we've hit the ground running. And I'm not just talking just us as councillors, but I'm talking the executive team as well. We are now working as a combined unit, and we're hitting the right marks here. And that's the reason why we're getting the funding and we're getting what we want from our advocacy strategy. So I think if we continue this momentum, I think we're going to see some very, very good achievements over the next couple of years. Councillor, would you like to close?
Thank you. And I certainly appreciate what you're saying, and I am in agreement with you to some extent, Mayor. I think, as I said, it wasn't just directed at this council, it was directed at the way that we have gone about advocacy for a long time. And it's just that acknowledgement that you need to be more sophisticated, because there are lots of councils who have done it very well and who have been on the front foot, and at times it's felt like we've been on the back foot. I acknowledge that I do get the sense that's changed, which is great, and really hope, again, this can be a moving document, and it will need to be, because again, as you've got different priorities changing within other levels of government, so too we need to be flexible, but it always needs to be strategic, not thought bubbles that are never going to get support. And I really hope it's pleasing for me to see that we're shifting from that view of the world.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.6 on tonight's agenda is on page 69 and is entitled Heritage Study 2018 Post-War. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Move the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm very passionate about retaining and preserving our heritage within Moonee Valley, and we've all worked very hard over the last few years on our heritage study and have completed assessments on non-residential buildings and are currently completing assessments for interwar, Edwardian and Victorian residential buildings. The last remaining piece of the puzzle is our post-war period. So we're looking to consult with our community on these proposals, and I want to stress that we need property owners to provide feedback on these buildings or these properties, and we are also open to hearing nominations from the community. In total, there are 29 post-war properties flagged for investigation. Most of them are in Buckley Ward, but in the grand scheme of things, there's not many of these properties. But I'm certainly looking forward to seeing this loop closed, and also look forward to hearing community feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Lawrence.
Only to endorse what Councillor Sharp's already mentioned, and that these are properties that fall within the bounds that are not Victorian, not Edwardian, but post Second World War. And in saying that, there are architectural pieces that once they're knocked down, like anything that gets removed, it's very hard to replace. So it's important that we try and retain some of these heritage items within our municipality, and of course it's an important thing that Buckley Ward keeps them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor? So, Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to speak in support of the motion, and very mindful that we've done an enormous amount of heritage work over the last council and this council, more than has been done in the many, many years before that. I'm always mindful about the fact that there are periods of architecture that have significant community appreciation and support, and certainly the Edwardian, Victorian and interwar periods are well loved and well recognised. I think Councillor Sharp has indicated that we'll be going out to the community, we'll be asking property owners for information, because it is one of those situations that if you leave it too long, that you end up with all of those particular properties, they end up being demolished. So I think hopefully as part of our work we can do some education around the importance of the post-war period. Because certainly you wouldn't like in 20 or 30 years' time for us in 2040 to be standing here and to not have any post-war properties on the heritage overlay. So I think it's it's that piece of the puzzle that we need to do, and certainly we'll be eagerly awaiting community feedback. And one of the great things about heritage studies are the stories that you get told about the history to the property, and why it was built and who built it, and I always love that, so I certainly will look forward, because we should be able to get, given in the post-war period, obviously, people who were there when the homes were built.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Sharp, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.7 on tonight's agenda is on page 72 as entitled East Timor Friendship City Review. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack.
Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation as a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the item?
Yes, well, over time, our relationship with Timor-Leste has changed. Timor-Leste, this council has had a connection with for the best part of 15, 16 years. And that follows, obviously, the terrible fate that befell the East Timorese people when they voted to become independent from Indonesia. There is a significant report attached to this officer's report that details, a significant appendix that is attached to this officer's report that details a long connection with East Timor. But where it's gone to over recent times is the need, clearly, for our council to reshape how it works with the East Timorese government, how it works in its partnership also with the Victorian government, who has a relationship with Timor-Leste, and to think a bit about how, and much more importantly, how we work within our own community. This was never intended. The relationship with Timor-Leste was never about just us to LICASAR. It was always about how LICASAR works back with us and what we can do on the ground here with our own expertise, so people coming from Timor-Leste to maybe experience and learn and develop skills and capacity based on what our officers know. But then there was always the internal thing within the city of Moonee Valley, that we had some deep roots within the Timorese community here, that we wanted to provide the opportunity for that community to be able to lift its head up within the city of Moonee Valley. Consequently, in 2009, with the 10th anniversary of the vote for independence, we held a very, very big fair down at the Flemington Community Centre, where there were over 60 different exhibits, 2 or 3 bands played that night, and upwards of 600, 700 people were in attendance. We now have relationships with Ave Maria School that is working with areas within East Timor and the likes of that. So at the core of all of this proposal is to get feedback around how this can continue to mature. We have there are 2 options basically on the table. One is for us to gradually move off the stage by just expending any cash that we've got and see you later. Or do we take a position here that is a moral position as a community, and do we take a position as a council, as a moral leader within our community, to sort of say that one of our nearest neighbours who went through so much, that has high figures of child mortality still, where life expectancy in East Timor is miles below anybody else's in and around our community, our neighbourhood within that Pacific Asian region, and can we work with others across Melbourne who are also got the Timorese partnerships going, and how do we help mature and focus those? And so the second option provides, I would argue, a relatively light touch. It keeps us in touch with the communities in Timor-Leste through a grants process and through working with the not-for-profits on the ground. It keeps us connected to the Timor government about its changes and the way it is reforming its processes, and it also keeps us connected with the state government, and as much as I said, it provides an opportunity for us to work back in through our own community and make changes ourselves. We disappeared the race day, and that was a fundamental mechanism for making money that was to go to support this work. What we're proposing to do is look at a whole range of other venues or avenues of raising cash that can be done. And I'm sure that over time, this relationship will work with other players. It's what we need now is the opportunity to re-establish a new base and start with it. So I'm hoping that that's the feedback we get, the feedback to support option 2, and I hope that fellow councillors endorse this approach so that we can get it out there for the community.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marshall.
Look, I would speak in support of the motion and would echo largely the comments of Councillor Cusack. Been mindful that this is a program that has run for some time now, or a series of actions, if you like. It's worthwhile having a look at it and seeing what we can do to make sure that we continue, where possible, to support near neighbours who are, talk about disadvantaged. You just have to look at those comparative health indicators in Table 2 in the report to see, as Councillor Cusack said, still the significantly decreased levels of life expectancy, infant mortality, that people from East Timor experience in comparison with Australia. The mechanism by which we continue to support, obviously there are a range of things that we can do, and I'll be interested in the feedback. We have been good, in my view, at supporting a range of different organisations that are worthy of support, and certainly the support we've provided in relation to a range of different programs has been life-changing. And I think we need to always keep that in mind. What, for us, are relatively minor amounts of money can significantly change the lives of people in Timor-Leste. And I always too, I think Councillor Cusack mentioned about those partnerships in our own community, and obviously Ave Maria do a magnificent job in the partnership that they have. And I'd like to see us to continue to explore that relationship and how we might be able to work with that school better to provide ongoing support.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Lawrence.
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor. Look, I don't think it's a bad idea to support philanthropic needs in other countries, and being a Rotarian, as Councillor Gauci-Marucci is also, Rotary supports a lot of charitable needs in other countries, and I know only just within my own local club we support specific causes in Kenya and Peru, the Philippines, as well as Myanmar, and they're ongoing. And I will say, in fairness to this council, and I haven't been a councillor for that long, and nothing happened last year in relation to funding East Timor, but the fact that ongoing support is often important, and one that in cases of very poor situations that the recipient comes to rely upon, and I just would like to see some more information back from the East Timor recipients. I like the idea of doing something in conjunction with a local school, Ave Maria, and they obviously have probably a stronger connection than maybe even this council does. So I would like to explore that even a bit more. So that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Councillor, any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Cusack, would you like to close?
Just to reiterate, as I mentioned, that there is Appendix A to the report that has got a very deep analysis of a whole swag of work that has gone on between Council and East Timor over the whole period of the journey, and also what is happening in the more recent times. But the reason nothing has happened in the last year or two is because we had hoped to actually bring this report to Council almost 12 months ago, but for various reasons it didn't happen. It is now, but we have, for instance, requests that are sitting on the table from the District of Likasar around support for a project with maternal and child health. It's an area that we worked in many years ago with the district, and did some major work there. We've also developed technological hubs, and we've also built a school in a very mountainous and remote area. And so the council's input in that area in East Timor has been quite substantial and changing for those communities. And of course, as Councillor Lawrence has just mentioned, the connection with Ave is more about us extending our role within the municipality. They have a particular area, a school that they go to on the other side of Timor, but it's also, we're taking up the cudgels here of working and trying to get the other friendship groups to work in a much more concerted and systematic way, rather than leaving it just a voice in the wilderness. So joined up we do better, divided we do a bit, and that's the name of the game.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council report 9.8 tonight's agenda is on page 86 as entitled Response to a Notice of Motion 2017-23 Skateboard Park at Fanny Street Reserve. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Mayor, you just have to excuse me, I've blown the system.
Would you like to move the officer's recommendation?
Well, hang on. I suppose I will, on the basis that it's a response to my notice of motion, so I'll do that.
Sure. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to turn your microphone on as well?
Oh, sorry. All right. Yep. Sorry, it's just not coming up on my hub. I'm sorry to the viewers out there. Look, a number of young people approached me some time ago about improving some aspects of Fanny Park, which is on the bicycle track on the Moonee Ponds Creek bicycle track, to make it more amenable for them and young people to use the park. Down there, for those people who know the park, there's already a small, modest BMX track. So all they wanted to do was attach something to the BMX track. Now, I understand that there's always costs associated with this and so on like that, and that there is and that the recommendation talks about the fact that there is going to be a skatable path built there in this current financial year, and that there is a proposal to put wayfinding signage in Boeing Reserve Skate Park. Wayfinding signage to get to Boeing Reserve Skate Park. If you're a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, you've got Buckleys of getting from Fanny Street to Boeing. Quite frankly, everybody has to pile in the car and make a trip out there. And that's what these kids were hoping not to do, because they already don't use the skate parks here because they're too far away. Where they're located is on the edge of West Brunswick, so they go to the skate parks in Brunny and so on. So what they were hoping for was something that was a bit more local. I'm happy that something is actually happening. I'm happy that we have a budget that I've spoken passionately about already, and its planning processes and all the rest of it. I think that, though, with some time that might pass in the future, people might find other ways to evidence the need for something in this area, and that those young people who would be serviced by it would get a result. So I'm happy enough to support the recommendation, as I said, but I'm also flagging that I'm not going to drop this one. The reality is, and it's an important one, is that stopping point at Fanny Street is an important one for the recreational users along the Moonee Ponds Creek path. There are 2 other spots that I can think of in a hurry, but I'm not you look at me, I'm not a bike rider, right? But I know Travancore Park, and I also know, obviously, Ormond Park, which is very nearby. And they're both natural stopping off points and joining in points. And when I talked about way signing as part of my motion, I was talking about the sign that's up on Mount Alexander Road pointing down Bent Street or down Wilson Street that said, Fanny Park's down here, you can connect onto the Moonee Ponds Creek. That's what I had in mind. And when people go down there, they could also join into a skate park and so on like that. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I'll leave it.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack.
Leave it.
Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak about Fanny Park Reserve?
I think I would also put this as a watch this space motion, because I did think about saying to my 9-year-old, almost 9-year-old, we're going to head from Fanny Street to Boeing Reserve, and yes, how that might play out, and I don't think it would play out well.
On to Rosehill.
Well, we could, but it's a long way, mate, with a 9-year-old. So, look, I think it's good that there is some work's being done there. You know, in our part of the world, it's, again, an area where we've got significant density already. And obviously an area where we will have increasing density, and the idea of providing a variety of options to young people is really important, and I think that this would have been great to be probably a bit grander than it's proposed to be at this stage, but let's see how it goes, and maybe it's something that we can continue to watch, and we'll continue to listen.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Cusack, would you like to close? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillors, the next item of business is notices of motion, and I believe we have no notices of motion listed tonight, so I'll go straight to the next item 11, which is, next item is of business, is of urgent business, and councillors, do we have any items of urgent business? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is my intention to move that the following motion as an item of urgent business. That 1, the acting Chief Executive Officer prepare a report for the Ordinary Council meeting on the 8th of May 2018 detailing the creation of a public event for the viewing of Australia's first game of the FIFA, soccer for those who don't know, World Cup, scheduled for Saturday the 16th of June 2018 at 8 p.m. 2, the report includes the following. A, potential locations for the event, including the Centreway at East Keilor. B, how the event could encourage involvement and local activation and economic stimulus for local traders. C, the coordination of pre-screening and halftime entertainment sourced from local community which embraces the cultural diversity of participating nations. D, evaluating the success of the event with a view to conducting additional public screenings at Essendon or Moonee Ponds in conjunction with local traders. E, a dollar amount as determined appropriate by council officers to run the event.
Councillors, I'll need a motion to accept the urgent business as read out by Councillor Byrne. Yeah. Councillor Marshall, do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharp, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the item? Sorry? You need a second. Yeah, Councillor Sharp, yeah.
Sorry, just to confirm, am I speaking to the item as is or speaking to the that it's urgent?
It's been resolved.
Yeah, okay.
Speak to him.
Okay, great. Look, I'm going to keep this fairly brief because I have asked for a report to come back next meeting. So depending on how that report comes back, I will hopefully speak to it with great enthusiasm then. But basically, as councillors, we've all been speaking about different events and how we can really activate the community and how we can potentially increase economic stimulus around some of our business areas. And it only came to me recently that we've got a massive event. I think that it actually rates higher than the Olympic Games, being the World Cup, without America qualifying. I'm not sure whether that'll be the case this time, but we'll see how we go. It is just a massive event, and I think that as councillors, it is a great idea to somehow have a live site somewhere within the municipality. I've put in here as an example potentially the Centreway, and that is partially due to our MV 2040 strategy, and also all the census data that says how multicultural we are up at the Centreway, particularly Europeans who often back football, soccer. I think that it has great potential. I don't think that it will be a big ticket item in terms of expense, but it will potentially create a atmosphere. I can just imagine a big screen at the front of the Centreway, the East Pantry and Class 90, and everyone sitting in the restaurant enjoying their pizzas, wearing their green and gold, cheering on the Socceroos. And could you imagine how crazy it could be if we actually scored against France? Anyway, no, as I said, I don't want to speak too much about it until we get the report, but we can dream until then and hopefully have support from fellow councillors to get this report done quickly.
Councillor, would any other councillor speak?
Mr Mayor, can I just, sorry to interrupt, point of clarification. You asked for if a move and a seconder for the urgent business, which Councillor Marshall moved, I seconded, but you don't have a seconder to date for Councillor Byrne's urgent business item.
Oh, okay.
You haven't called for it yet. You only called for the actual urgent
Sure,
business.
okay. Right, do I have a seconder? Councillor Gauchi-Marici. Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Would you like to speak to the item, Rebecca?
Albeit briefly, have a brother who plays soccer in a sporting chunky family, so I'm sure they would appreciate a similar initiative. Being the pragmatist I am, look forward to the report coming back telling us what it is likely to cost, where it would work best, and what the return on investment for us is. But certainly activating areas in our community is something I'm really passionate about, and it aligns nicely with neighbourhoods. So certainly I look forward to seeing the report come back.
Thank you, Councillor. Would any other councillor? Councillor Lawrence.
Only briefly, Mr Mayor, and that is if we're looking at just football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, maybe we can look at some of the other more important sports as well, be that AFL or even the big netball series between New Zealand and Australia, of course, that women's sport being something that we're very passionate about on this council. So I just throw that out there. I'm not looking to change the motion, but I just remind that there are other sports in this world and also very important ones.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Cusack.
Just thinking about other locations, at the back of the Flemington Community Centre, we've run many films and events that are associated with video, and on the big wall there, and I think that would be an interesting location because the kids down there are absolutely mad stupid for soccer, and anything that would feed into that is welcome. Well, I just took the liberty while the motion was being moved, Councillor Byrne. Everybody knows we're in the group of death. I mean, when you're lining up against France, Peru and Denmark, it's a pretty hefty call for us. But I do appreciate that the World Cup is just that. It's the world game, and the world game has an attraction for all sorts of people. So it's well worth having a bit of a go about having a look at this. So I think it can be done. And if it enlivens a retail area and brings families into it on a Saturday night and creates a sense of more community, all the strength of your arm. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is just the start of potentially something new. We've done movie nights before, but why not? As Councillor Lawrence said, let's start moving in the sporting space. If there's a possibility, there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing, the Anzac Day games and so many other things. I think there's so many live sites that are around pubs and clubs, and they're not family friendly. And I think as a council, we have a real opportunity to really engage people. And in relation to Councillor Cusack, yes, we've got a hard group, but 3 points against Peru, 1 against Denmark, or vice versa, give us 4 points, a low goal difference, and there's a chance we can get through on 4 points. Not liking our chances against France, but you never know, with all the support at the Centreway or wherever the live site, they might hear us and might do all right. If we get away with the point, it'd be good.
I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Since we're speaking of sports, I'll just give everyone a quick update. Richmond is 30 and Melbourne is 18, and we're into the second quarter. And I've got one more sports report since we're talking about sports. We have a Moonee Valley resident called Stone May, who was at the Australian National Swimming Championships in Brisbane, and he has just won the 200-metre backstroke, and he has beaten the Australian record by 9 seconds. And this is from a 13-year-old resident. So that's really good to hear. Next item of business is confidential reports. And councillors, we have one confidential report this evening. Councillors, do I have a motion that the meeting go into camera to consider the matter which contains information relating to industrial matters? Councillor Sharp, you happy to move it? Councillor Marshall, happy to second it? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. The meeting is now closed to the public, and I just want to thank our audience in the live streaming for tuning into this council meeting. And from the City of Moonee Valley, it's time to say goodbye. Anzac Day, and thank you very much. And hopefully we see everyone at the dawn service tomorrow morning. Thank you.